Welcome to Declutter for Change, the podcast where we clear the visible and invisible clutter from your mind, body, soul, and home to make room for the life you actually want to live and love. I'm your host, Heather Clark, and today we have our guest, Kam Knight, talking to us about internal resistance. Kam is a mentor, international speaker, and best-selling author of a dozen books in the area of mental, emotional, and physical performance. He is known for bringing fresh solutions and insights that are rare departure from traditional ideas. Because of his fresh perspective, his books have become the gold standard for their respective topics, which have helped over 500,000 people. When he's not coaching or writing, he's traveling, having traveled to over 100 countries around the world. Hi, Kam. How are you? How is everything going?
I am doing fantastic. I am traveling at the moment, so you guys don't see me in my normal background, which you're not going to see in this podcast because there is no background since it's audio only. But other than that, I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing amazing. And I am so excited. When we talked about the podcast idea and title and what we're going to talk about today, I have so many women already waiting for this
Yeah.
podcast to come out because they can absolutely resonate with the idea of the internal resistance. So
Yeah.
that is such a huge thing. So I'd like to actually ask you, first of all, how many, like your bio said you've been to like over 100 countries. That's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. But also I'd like to know, how did you come into being a coach, being into this, topic, talking about it on different podcasts? Because you were saying you do about 4 or 5 podcasts a week. What got you into this? And was there like a switch from, were you in corporate before, or was this something that you're like, no, this is what I've always wanted to do, and this is where I'm going with this?
Yeah. So I've got mainly two stories that play out to how I got to this place. The first is, as far back as I can remember, I've been a fairly driven individual. And what I like to say is, living in this time and in this culture, it's not hard to be driven as there's so much personal development content. And more or less, everyone is telling you to do more, be your best self, and reach for the stars. And as a result, I've always wanted to do more, have more, and be more in life. And although I had my fair share of success, in a lot of ways, I felt like I missed the mark, that I fell short, or the success was much more difficult and stressful than it needed to be. And I always wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can or don't do it. Now, at the time, there were no clear or good answers. The best answer I kind of came across is an answer that gets talked about in personal development a lot, and that's beliefs or discipline. And
Mm.
yes, those are part of the equation, but I think they're a much smaller piece to a much larger puzzle. And over the last 15 years, that question lingered in my mind. Every time I felt stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why can't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want? And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human mind as well as human behavior. And little did I know, my unconscious was processing all that information. And at a certain point, I had this epiphany or aha moment where I was like, hey, wait a minute. There's a part of our mind built to hold us back. There's a part of our brain designed to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's a brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. So this is how the internal resistance piece kind of came about. But, you know, circling back much earlier, when I moved to the US, I had parents who had the quadrant was high expectations and low
Mm-hmm.
support. And not only that, but the part of the world I come from is so starkly different from the US. I had a culture shock. Like, it was a complete shock to my brain. And since my parents weren't really around, I didn't really know what was going on. And so
Mm.
I naturally turned to television to get understanding of how the society worked and people work and things of that nature. And unfortunately, the conclusion that my brain made from watching television is that it was all about the external, having a big house, nice car, prestigious job, a lot of money in the bank account. So that added to me being a fairly driven individual. And so in high school, so I felt at a core level that I needed these things to get the attention and respect of others and to feel worthy. So in high school, I wanted to get into an Ivy League school. And from there, I wanted to get into a prestigious firm. And although I got into a decent college, it wasn't Ivy League. And although I got a good job, it wasn't with one of the big 5 accounting firms or an investment banking firm. And in many ways, this is kind of my experience, and not just in the macro level, but even micro, where I would have a goal to get fit or develop a skill and things of that nature. And either I would get excited and not start. If I started, I would stop. If I didn't stop, I would sabotage myself before I made or before getting to the finish. And in a lot of ways, I did this over and over. And so at a certain point, I had an itch to write, and it was an overpowering itch that I couldn't resist. And so I followed it, and I experienced a lot of resistance in writing my first book. And after a while, it got easier. And so by about my 10th book, there was a chapter in it, which I call the wanting mechanism. And that really was the germ that kind of seeded the concept of internal resistance. And having talked about it for a few years now, I find that everyone resonates with it, whether it's men, women, old, young, and whether they're in school or in the corporate world and so on. So, yeah, I hope that was a good primer for how I came to this topic.
Yes, it was. And it actually brought up a few questions, because when it comes to, like you were saying, you were like, I had the motivation, I had the, this is exactly how I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to act, where I'm supposed to go for school, all that stuff. And the same women that are my audience absolutely feel that. They, you're supposed to be a mom, you're supposed to be a partner, you're supposed to be, on the PTA, all those things. And yet it's that internal, like, okay, yeah, I'm motivated, but is this really what I want? And that's where they get confused. So how do we adjust to know that the internal resistance is just that it's your body just going, no. Okay, we're good with this. It's just something new, versus no, this is not actually aligned to us. This is not something that I want. This is something that society has told me I want, or my family has told me I want. How do we know the difference between that internal resistance?
So this is a fantastic question, and it'll help to understand how resistance works. And then we can kind of dissect how we can answer this question. So the part of the brain that creates wants works separately and independent from the part that actually allows us to act on the want. This is really key, so I'll say it one more time. The part of the brain that creates desires works independent of the part that actually allows us to act on that desire. So we have one part of the brain that's creating wants, and in many ways, it's pretty unrestrained. It's creating endless wants, one after another. It was never meant to see if a want was worth going after or pursuing. Its only job is to create wants. And in a lot of ways, it's cranking out wants one after another at a pace faster than any one person can achieve. And then we have another part of the brain that checks to see and evaluate if that want is worth pursuing and going after. So this is the part that is giving us the green light. So it's really important to understand here that it's possible for the brain, one brain, to both create a desire for something and at the same time hold us back from it. So when a person is in that tug of war where they're like, I want this thing, but I'm not moving forward. I want this other thing, and like, why can't I make progress? It's because of this dynamic. Now, when resistance decides if it should let you do something or not, it goes through a whole host of criteria. So think about going through a checklist. And if any of the items are not part of, or it's not crossed off, the resistance will prevent action. In fact, a better analogy for this would be standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision that comes up must go through them. And if even one of the members is against the idea, it will not pass. And so what's really important to understand is people think it's resistance that holds us back, but it's really both. Our own wants can be a challenge to going after them, and so can resistance. And so to start going into your question about, well, how do I know if a want is aligned? Again, our wanting mechanism is unrestrained, and it's creating endless wants one after another. And what I help people understand is that your wanting mechanism creates more wants in like a single week or month than you have the time, energy, and resources to achieve in
Oh, I
multiple
can definitely. Listen, listeners, how many ideas, if you're a business owner or you
Yes,
have an idea to do a side gig or anything, how many of those you get per day, let alone per week? So yes, I totally get the fact that like a million wants in a
yeah,
lifetime come with you.
yeah,
So yeah, continue.
yeah,
Sorry, I just wanted to say that because that is definitely something that I'm like, I know
yeah,
firsthand that so many wants. Like, oh yeah, I want that, 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 and that. But what do I actually want?
exactly. And now we're living in a time where there are so many more options, and our options have options.
Oh
So
my
there's a
goodness,
lot more
yes.
things that we can do, a lot more things we can experience, and a lot more things we can go after. So we have a lot more stimuli in our environment to trigger the wanting mechanism. And the more people are around doing so many different things,
Mhm.
the more it's going to get triggered. And so it's really important to understand, again, our wanting mechanism is an on-off switch. So when it's creating a want, it's not actually checking to see if it's achievable or fulfilling or even worth doing. And so we can assume that because we have a want, we should go after it, but that's not the case. And
Mm.
also, our wanting mechanism doesn't understand that our time is constrained, that it's creating more wants in a single day than we have
Yeah,
time
no
for.
kidding,
Yeah.
right?
And so we need to start becoming a little bit we need to do those things for it. And so when it is creating all these different wants, we have to actually check to see if we have the time, if we have the bandwidth, and if it's actually going to be fulfilling and things of that nature. If we take the wants word for it, we'll be going after everything, and then we'll quickly
Mm.
get burnt out. And there's a lot of talk about burnout these days, and I do
Yes.
think a lot of it stems from our wanting mechanism because it's triggering us to pursue all these wants that we just don't have the bandwidth, let alone the energy to do it. One more thing I do want to add about the wanting mechanism is that when our brain does trigger a want for something, it'll release all these positive, euphoric
Hmm.
feelings of not only how good it'll be once we get that want, but that we can actually go after it and it will be achievable and that we should go after it. Again, without looking at all the other wants that we're working on or how much time and constraint it will put on us. So once a person can understand that, they can know that, hey, I'm not the one actually choosing all these things to do. It's really triggered by a part of my brain and is being triggered because of all the stimuli in my environment. One, and two, it's not even checking to see if it'll be fulfilling. So I have to step in and to do some of that analysis for it. So, and I just want to say this is just one challenge of our wanting mechanism. There's actually more challenges, but I don't want to keep
Oh,
talking.
joy. So, it could be just so much more complicated than just this because, it's a
Yes,
human brain. They're just so
I
simple,
know.
aren't they?
The human brain is so simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So how do we know? How can we, when there is wants, because again, it's the stimuli, like you were saying, especially now with AI coming, there's so many different ideas we can have and everything like that. But
Yeah.
how do we differentiate from a want that is just continually coming in and one that we should actually have the other part, as you were saying, actually analyze it and go, is this feasible for me? How do we differentiate and which ones we choose? Because I can tell you, I have 20 million. I've got a whole binder full of all the ideas and all the wants and all the things. But is there something that we feel in our body, or is it something that, if, like you said, checking off all those things, what are a couple of those things to check off to decide, oh, this might actually be something I should pursue?
Yeah. So again, because we're dealing with the complexities of the mind and body, it's not a cookie cutter answer,
Mm,
but I can give people frameworks of how the mind and body work so we can decide what is a good one to pursue or not. And it'll help to understand some of the other challenges of our wants. One of the challenges has to do with misaligned wants,
mm,
where in fact, there's a lot of talk about alignment these days, that we
yes.
have to be aligned with our goals and aspirations. And what does alignment really mean, though? To me, at the most basic fundamental, alignment simply means what what the mind creates and how the body responds. So just because the brain creates a want for something doesn't mean the body will respond to it, always respond to it, or as much as that we think. In fact, the body can respond to something completely different. And I'll share an example that I'm sure a lot of your listeners hit home with.
Hmm.
Maybe they're out at a bar or at a cafe and they see a guy and their brain creates this like real arousal attraction, like, oh, this
Hmm.
guy's great. But when she talks to the guy, it's kind of like, wah, wah, he wasn't as great as it seemed, right?
I'm sure we've all experienced that, men and women, not just women.
Yes, yes. So we've all experienced that. So this is a great example of our brain can create a really intense, arousing desire for something and make us feel like, oh, this is going to be great. But when we have that thing, it doesn't feel as great. And this isn't just in relationships, it happens in a lot of areas.
Yep.
And so we have to understand, we have to get more in tune with how our body responds to things and consciously become aware, oh yeah, my brain's creating a want and desire for this, but when I went after it, it didn't really work out. And so I learned that these aren't kind of the things that I like. This isn't the type of work that I like doing, even though my mind is saying, wow, if I had this, or if I moved in this direction for a business, it would be so great. So this is going to be really important, is to understand what our body actually responds to when we are actually pursuing the want or receiving the want. So this is going to be really helpful. Another challenge of wants has to do with what I call strong wants. And there's a big challenge to strong wants because in many ways, our wants and resistance, they're kind of the same fabric, meaning when our wants grow, so does our resistance. And our resistance growing makes our want grow even more. And that in turn makes our resistance grow even further. And very quickly, this can become a feedback loop or a runaway process because now we want this thing really bad and can't have it really bad. And so a lot of times when we have a strong want, it can actually create equal amounts of resistance that keep us from going after it. I'm sure everyone here listening also has experienced moments where they wanted something really bad and things weren't moving for them. And as soon as they let it go, things began to fall into place. So a lot of times it really helps to look at why we want the thing so badly. Is it because we really think it's going to be enjoyable and fulfilling? Or is it because this runaway process got triggered and now we're just caught in this strong desire?
Well, and I
And
find a lot of it too has to do with, if you grew up with parents that are strict, that needed you to go a
yes,
certain way. Like I know a lot of women, had to do the schooling and had to, become the doctors, the lawyers, that et cetera. And then all of a sudden they're like, this isn't actually what I want. And then
exactly.
they have to go through that list of wants. What is it that I did actually want? And
Yeah,
what would have happened if I had pursued my want versus just done what my parents wanted me to do? So
yeah,
that's a huge thing too for the listeners and for anyone who is actually listening. But is it mine or is it my parents, society, family, etc.?
yeah. And that's a big one. And then there's one other challenge to want that's really important to understand, which can really help everyone when they can decide what want to pursue. And that is when the brain does create a want for something, it usually comes with a feeling of lack. So wants create lack.
Mm.
It's because we don't have it. And that lack for a lot of people can be painful. And the more pain there is, the more we need to achieve or realize that want. And so oftentimes we're chasing things not because it'll be achievable or fulfilling, but simply to remove the pain of not having it. And this is one of the biggest challenges of want, because a lot of times when the want does get triggered, we're in this pain and we don't want to be in pain. And we feel like to get rid of the pain, we need to achieve this want. And then once we achieve it, we feel just as empty and unfulfilled and wondering why. Well, it's because unconsciously we were going after that want simply to remove the pain and not to actually do something that would be fulfilling.
Oh, that is
Now,
huge. That is
it's,
huge. I know right now there's a listener going, ouch.
yeah,
Yeah. I didn't
yeah,
actually want it. I just didn't want the pain that was associated with that.
yeah. And so when I talk about resistance, what I help try to people understand, what I try to help people understand is that there are a lot of nuances to what's going on, and we have to understand the nuances. It's not just simple cookie cutter. And so what's crazy is because now we're living in a society and culture with so many options,
Mm-hmm.
and it's triggering our wanting mechanism a lot more, meaning it's creating a lot more pain in us that we feel compelled to chase after all these things just to remove the pain. So it's really important to start limiting the triggers and stimuli. So one of the best ways to do that is not to let the brain trigger so many wants, because again, we have all this pain, and oftentimes the only way to remove it is to realize it. But as I mentioned, sometimes it can take weeks, months, or years, and we just can't realize every want that we're creating. Now, to add one more thing to actually talk about how to find something that is fulfilling, there's one other challenge to that. One is that a lot of times when we do something in the beginning, it's quite difficult and awkward and annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Before I go further, can you hear the pounding or no? Okay, perfect. Because I'm in a co-working space, and for some reason, the day I need to do this podcast, somebody needs to
And it's
be
all
handling
good.
something.
This is how we roll around here. We
Perfect.
cannot hear it on my end, so I'm gonna assume that the listeners can't either. So you're
All
good.
right, perfect. So, so in order, when we start doing something new, no matter what it is, it's always uncomfortable and it's awkward and it doesn't feel right. And those feelings can give the impression that it's not aligned, that it's not an aligned goal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case. It just means we just need to do it enough to build a habit and muscle for it. And once I get comfortable, then we can decide if it's truly aligned or not. And then the other challenge of finding something that is aligned and fulfilling is the things that do seem comfortable that we really want to stick with, oftentimes can be things that are avoiding us from the things that we are afraid of and really should be doing. So there's
Oh, and
another
that's
challenge.
yeah, that's the thing. So a lot of times it's you're comfortable. You're doing
Yes.
it, you're comfortable, you got into the habit. Okay, this feels good. Like, okay, I'm aligned. But
Yeah.
really you're not growing, you're not stretching, you're not changing. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that like, okay, that internal resistance by staying comfortable
Yes.
is so huge for a lot of motivated people because it's like I'm motivated, but I'm also comfortable here. If I
Yes.
change, then what does that mean for my identity? If I do
Exactly.
that and I have to get out of my comfort zone, as you know, the typical thing online is what does that mean for what I've done? Does it mean everything I just did is no longer important? No, that's
Yeah.
not what it means. It just means you're coming and adjusting and going to a different level.
Exactly. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's a lot of the things that can seem aligned just means we're comfortable doing it and
Mhm.
not necessarily what's going to help us take the next step and move us toward the things that are really going to be fulfilling. So now bringing up the concept of comfort zone really helps us segue into resistance. Because as I mentioned, anytime a desire, a course of action, or even a decision stands before you, it gets evaluated by the other part of the brain, which I call resistance, using a whole host of criterias. So the question is, what are the criterias? And there's many criteria the brain will evaluate. And in my work, I found there's a good 2 to 3 dozen criterias. And one of them has to do with comfort zone. The brain will go, will doing this thing move me out of my comfort zone? And if it does, it will create resistance. And what's really interesting to know about comfort zone is that majority of our comfort zones aren't actually comfortable. They can be actually annoying and painful. Oftentimes we stay in them because it's a place where we know what to do, know how to do it, and there's not a lot of mental strain to learn something new and different.
Yep.
So I believe that part of our comfort zone challenges is really comes down to learning, because learning puts a lot of strain on the brain. You know, thinking, reading, problem solving.
Yep. Learning something new. Yep.
Yeah. And the more strain it creates, the more resistance will arise. So I want people to know that when they are dealing with comfort zone, it may not be because there's some fear of moving out of comfort zone. It's just the brain thinks that the information that we're going to need to learn and get good at and to apply may require too much strain. And so we'll just keep doing what we quote unquote know versus.
Well, and I think a lot of it too has to do with in a comfort zone, in something you are comfortable that you've done day in, day out, you can predict the outcome. So therefore, you know, we're going to go back to our body feels safe doing that. Okay, cool. Yeah. We're good. We know what we can predict the outcome. Therefore, yeah, we'll do that because I know what's going to come. Whereas when we step out of that and do something that we have no clue what we're doing when we're learning, well, that fail part of us goes, oh, but what if I fail? Well, what if I don't know how to do this? What if I don't actually succeed in this? We can't predict the outcome. Therefore, we're not going to, that resistance shows up and screams at us and goes, never mind, go back to your comfort zone. You know the outcome for that.
Yeah. And that's a huge piece too. So the knowing part isn't the skills we need, but knowing that there's an outcome that we know, and we know how to react to it. Whereas when we're doing something that goes out of our comfort zone, even though it may be safe to do, we just don't know the outcome. So it becomes a little bit more threatening to our brain.
Yeah, that is crazy. That it's so weird to just think about like how many ideas and how many wants and how many things come through and then have to go through the next phase. And it's like, oh, do I want that? Do I not want that? Is that mine? And it's so crazy. And just with the amount of information we get on a daily basis of people saying, oh, this is what you should want. This is how you should want it. And then we've got to decipher like, is it though? Is it really what I want?
Yeah. Because a lot of our wants have been implanted, more or less. And a lot of it actually gets implanted when we're growing up from conditioning from our parents. And then when we start going into school, the conditioning from teachers and principals. And then one of the most difficult parts of this is the media. Whether it's
huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah, well, as television shows, movies, scrolling through social media, or even video games. And the reason I say so challenging is because the more we're learning about the mind, the more we're getting good at marketing and convincing people of how to think, act, and behave.
Yep, the psychology behind it, the like apps, and even just training the AIs to do it that way.
Exactly.
It's absolutely crazy. Yes.
Yeah. And what I tell people is if you want to understand human behavior, learn marketing. That's going to give you much better insight than you will from studying psychology, because they have so much data. They look at they do A/B testing. They look at all the different elements that go into people's decisions. I mean, marketing has gotten so good that they can convince us of doing something and make us think that we decided
made that decision. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. I've even seen where they now do, if you're reading something, even your eye movement and where it goes now. And I've even seen the graphics, like just graphics that say, oh, you'll read this first, and then you'll read here, and then you'll
Yeah.
read there. And then I'm like, whoa, that was weird. But that
Yeah.
is absolutely part of it. They have all that information, and that's where the body, where you're saying like you got to get your head and your body connected to figure
Yeah.
out, is this something I'm being told I want, or is this something I actually want? And then going through that list of deciding like, hey, yeah, okay, no, this is, yeah, I'm not afraid to do this based on, I might fail, and I'm not afraid that, okay, I'm going to be judged. It's, I'm going to do it anyways because this
Yeah.
actually excites me.
Yeah. Oh, this is something I resonate with. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say people really cut out media as much as possible. It's hard
Mhm.
not to these days, especially like social media, especially for entrepreneurs, because we need to be on media
Yeah.
to let people know what we're doing. And this is one of the ways we market and things of that nature. But really get control on what shows up in your feed, because it's possible to actually control what shows up in your feed, even if you have to go into the social media apps and whatnot. We can actually cut out the other stuff like the television and shows and maybe a lot of the commercials, especially the commercials. Like it's really important that we kind of cut a lot of those
I
out.
don't even have a TV, so I don't watch TV, let alone commercials. Yeah, my media is the social media, or if I choose to watch a movie every once in a while and stuff like
Once
that.
in a
But
while.
yeah, no, it is huge if you do watch TV on a regular basis. If you do have all those commercials throwing you, oh, you want this product, you want that, you want
Yeah.
whatever, and then it's like, now with AI, you have it coming at you faster and faster and faster, and the way
Yeah.
that the AI adjusts to even just your algorithm,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're getting ads for things that you've even just talked about. You didn't actually scroll, you didn't whatever. It's like, excuse
Yeah.
me, why is this on my feed? And
Yeah.
how did you know I was talking about this or thinking about this now? And that's, I think, where we really, really have to be discerning is this because of, like you were saying, marketing, or is
Yeah.
this something to actually pursue? And I think that's what's going to be a huge thing for a lot of the listeners is there's so much coming at them between their business or their, job, between their family, between their, anything, and going,
Yeah.
okay, what's here that is mine and what's here that is not?
Exactly. And I know some people think, oh, I'm not on social media, or I've got
Mm.
my settings in a way where everything's locked down, but that's on your phone. And if you're hanging around with others, all those apps can hear you from other people's phones. So they can
Mhm.
still hear your conversation. I just want people to know that. So all of this brings us to the time that we're living in, the culture and the society, as well as all the media, especially in social media, and taking it one step further, the AI that's kind of running a lot of this stuff.
Mhm.
We're at a point where it's really important to develop the skill of saying no. We have to start saying a lot more no's and get comfortable saying no's without feeling that guilt and pain, like should have said yes, or the regret. In fact, I would say, and I'm even being conservative, we want to be saying like 9 no's for every yes.
Oh, there you
Yeah,
go. 9
yeah,
no's, listeners, for every 1 yes. Yep.
yeah.
I
And that's
usually
a
say if
concept.
it's not like a hell yes, I'm kinda, it gets automatically pushed to a no.
Yeah, exactly. And I think singular focus is more important now than ever before. Like really picking a couple of things that you want to pursue and just focusing on that and not letting your brain distract you into other things. Because again, the way the brain works and living in the times that we are, it's so easy to take on 10, 15, 20 things and not realize that we've been done it.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Oh,
know
I've
that,
done it myself. Yeah, doing
yeah,
like this project, and that, and this, and that, and doing all these
yeah,
ideas and everything, and it's all of a sudden it's like, hey, wait a second. And that's actually how my own business came about. What it looks like now is I was like,
yeah,
the answer is not doing more. It's
yes,
actually removing the things that got in the way to that actually became the resistance. Because
yes,
having so many ideas and having so many wants, that's where the resistance comes in too, because it's like, oh, well, which
yeah,
one do I choose? Well, when you actually take the time to sit down and go, okay, this is no, oh no, no, I didn't actually want that. That was an idea that, you know, we were just talking with the friends or whatever. No, that's not going to actually come through. And then just going and letting go of the ones that you really don't want to move forward with. And that one or two or three things that you're like, okay, this is going to help me with my growth. This is going to help me with who I actually am. This is something I actually want. And this is also going to help others. And that's how this business came about for me, is just the fact that I was like, wait, I can't be the only one like this. And of course, I was not. There are plenty of women. This is why I also work with women primarily, is because we have that guilt that you were talking about earlier, that, saying the no out of guilt is like, oh, well, I feel guilty. Well, should I have, well, maybe I can do it for 10 minutes. Maybe I can do it for half an hour. And it's like, no, that's still taking your time, your energy, your like part of you away from what you actually want. So, that's so crazy. That's so crazy that like all of this, no matter what it is, no matter how you look at it, it all comes down to, no, you need to start letting go versus adding more.
Yeah. And, to add to that, I want to say that what makes it even more challenging, and I know I've said the word, this makes it even more challenging, but again, there are a lot of these nuances, is that our programming has programming to protect itself. What that means is, if our brain wants us, for whatever reasons, to get caught up in all these different desires and chase all these different things, it has programming that will have us doing it, even though we're realizing this is not the way to do it. And one of that programming is things like guilt and regret. So a lot of times we take on a lot more is because, so the brain will trigger all these wants and will use logic and rational thinking to say, no, I don't have the time and bandwidth for it. And then the brain wants us to continue moving forward. So then it'll trigger feelings of guilt. Like, oh, I really should do that. And if I don't, then it'll mean this and that. So, okay, fine, I'll pursue all these things. And if we can resist the guilt, then it'll use regret. And it's like, oh, then I'll feel regret that I didn't do it when I had that opportunity to. And so there are things that are going on that's going to make it challenging to stay in our resolve. So this is going to be really good insight for people who have had challenges with sticking with singular process, knowing that there's other stuff going on internally that'll continue to have us go in all sorts of directions. I do want to talk about one type of criteria that I don't get a chance to share in podcasts that comes up for a lot. And the fact that you said there are women listening to this who were told that they should be a doctor and lawyer and are in a place of wondering, like, what is it do I really want? So as I mentioned, when resistance stops us, it goes through that checklist. And one of the items is comfort zones that we talked about. Like, is this going to move me out of my comfort zone? And if so, resistance will stop us. Some of the other things include things like habits. If I'm doing something that goes against my habit, of course, resistance will put the brakes on it so we can continue the old habit. If we're doing something that we don't believe is possible, so this is where the beliefs come in, of course, resistance will slow our progress. But there's one criteria that's kind of really interesting. It's that many people are still worried about the judgment of their peers. That is, people are still worried about what the kids that they grew up with are still thinking of them. Even though we're all grown up and we don't talk to or see them, or even though we might live in a different city, state, or country, a part of our brain is still concerned what they're thinking, and it's affecting our decisions right here and now. And it's happening a lot more than you think, or it's a lot more common than you think. Because the more people help through resistance, the more this comes up. Anytime they set out to do something, a part of their brain worries what the bully that made fun of them, the kids that laughed at them, or the girl that rejected them, or in this case, the guy that rejected them, will think if they find out. And again, it's affecting our decisions and actions right here and now, even though we're 20, 30 years beyond those kids and we don't even see it.
Yeah. But again, that comes back to social media. That's where social media comes in. And we're like, ooh, yeah, what if? Meanwhile, let me just tell you, audience, nobody gives a crap. just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about their own stuff. They're not worried about what you're doing.
Nobody cares,
Yep.
but the way resistance works, it can make it seem like people care.
Oh, for
And
sure. Yes.
yeah, and it makes it seem like they care much more than really they do. And it can really derail us. It can really make us
Mm-hmm.
keep us from making decisions that we really truly want or would be fulfilling. In fact, I'll go as far as to say, I know for a fact, everyone listening here has memories of people from their past, including their childhood, flash in their mind from time to time. And those
Mm-hmm.
memories don't show up for nostalgic reasons. They actually show up to reinforce the walls in their life. So they may have a desire to do something, and all of a sudden, a memory of such a person will flash in their mind. And unconsciously, they'll be like, oh, I don't want to do that thing. Or, nope, I'm not going to go there. And oftentimes, they won't even realize there was a desire underneath. But there likely was, and the memory flashed, and it kept it from doing that. So this is another reason for resistance, because our brain is still focused on what what and who we were when we were younger. And the reason this plays out is because, back in hunter-gatherer days, or when we lived in small towns and villages, it's not like how it is now, where you graduate from high school and into college with a new set of people, and then you graduate college into the real world with a new set of people.
Or even in a totally different country, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So back then, the town or tribe you grew up in was likely the town and tribe you died in.
Yep.
And you probably didn't see anyone else outside of the people in your town and tribe your entire life. And so the brain became very sensitive to kind of keeping us in those roles and becoming conscious of what the people when we were young were thinking of us and what they would be thinking of us now when it doesn't matter. Because back then it mattered, but now it doesn't.
Yeah, because
So
back then it mattered a matter of my survival. If I'm not liked and I'm shunned out of the tribe, that
yeah,
means I'm on my own and I may not survive. And we
exactly.
still have that through our, genetics and through our DNA and everything like that. And it's like, now we've got to decipher, does that mean right now that if I do this and somebody says, ooh, and I get a hate comment on my video or whatever,
Yeah.
does that mean I'm going, I'm unsafe? No, but our
Yeah.
body doesn't realize that
Yeah.
yet. We have to train it to realize that.
Yeah, and that feeling of unsafety it creates, I mean, it could be really intense.
Yeah.
Like a minor decision to do something that goes against a role that they were in when they were young can feel very much almost like a panic attack. It feels like it's going to be so intense. But hopefully this can help them realize that it's really not that bad. And whatever anybody does, decides anyone listening here, whatever want they decide to pursue, no matter how much their brain makes them think that they'll be ostracized and be left out into the wild, one, likely they won't be ostracized. And if they are from that group, there are plenty of groups to, connect with. So
yeah. Well, I was about to say, especially nowadays, there's so many, like if you have one friend group that you're like, this just isn't jiving with me anymore.
yeah,
Find the people that you do jive with, that do help you, that, grow with you, that don't keep you in that comfort zone or don't make fun of you for being and wanting something different than what you currently have. And that's going to be a lot for the listeners, because I know that's one thing is like, oh, but my friend group or, nobody's really a business owner, so I can't really talk to them about this stuff. They don't understand it. It's like, okay, but also find your tribe that does understand it, that does allow you to grow and move forward. And if over time, the people that are in the original group are like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Why aren't you coming out with me? Why aren't you doing this with us? And then they're trying to keep you like the small part of you. And it's like, no, it's okay to let them go as well. They might have just been a moment in your life of where to get you to where you are now. And that's, again, the whole idea of letting go of things that, don't align with not only your today, but your moving forward and your future you.
Yeah.
So,
if things are hard in your business, it's almost always because you're not around the right people.
Yep.
Yeah, because if you're around the right people, They are going to give you not only encouragement and support, but more importantly, you're going to see what they're doing that works and not works. And it and oftentimes it could be these little nuanced things that make all the difference that you could never receive anywhere else. You couldn't receive it from your friends and things of that nature. You can only do it by being around the right network of people. And it makes it even easier because when you're around the right network of people, they know people and those people know people. So it becomes easier to let others know your offer. And there is a wider pool of people who have potential need for it. So it
Well,
just
and they've
becomes a
probably already gone through too the resistance that you're currently going through. So
yes,
everyone in that, like, they're like, oh no, no, we've been down this road before. Here's what we do, and you can get those ideas of ways of moving through the resistance that shows up a time and time again when we change.
yeah,
So
exactly, yeah. So that's what I found for me. I've made a lot of different shifts in my life, and I have gone through plateaus and areas where I was struggling, and it always came down to if I just got around a different circle of people that
mhm.
could help me in that area, it would make things a lot easier. And it always did. Now, the challenge of that is sometimes it requires letting go of the prior circle of people. And the challenge there is because we have built a relationship and network and a camaraderie, but now we're at a point where it's just not serving us or as much as it could. And it is time to take the next step. And again, that resistance
Yep.
will arise in helping us or in taking that next step from that old group to the new group. So yeah.
Yeah, that is perfect. All right, I think this is a fantastic point to actually ask you my four pillar mind,
Okay.
body, soul, and home. What tips for all the listeners that are listening to this right now when it comes to the resistance and the internal resistance? What can they do for their mind, body, soul, and home? Each individual tips so that they can move not just past it and ignore it, but move through it and understand what it looks like when they continue to do the things in the future.
All right. Fantastic question. We talk quite a bit about what's going to hold us back, but it's going to be really helpful to have some tools that move us forward. And what I say is when it comes to resistance, you can't necessarily apply the tips that are used for the A-type personalities or the go-getters.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a different approach. And one of that approach is you want to focus on things that take little effort and have results. Little action a person can take that can lead to big outcomes. And so for the mind, I think the simplest thing a person can do to really help them move past the resistance is self-talk. So for
Mm.
those who don't know, self-talk are statements that you say and repeat to yourself of the changes that you want to have or have happen. I'll just give some simple examples. For example, if I wanted to improve my memory, in addition to reading books about memory and learning memory techniques, I could repeat statements like, I have an excellent memory. I easily remember names, dates, facts, presentations, or any information I choose. If a person wants to become more assertive, they can go out and get coaching and training, and they can supplement that with the statement, I am a calm, confident communicator. I easily communicate my thoughts, ideas, needs, and wants. Now, on the surface, these statements may not seem like it's all that much or could do all that much, but it's huge.
Yep. And
That's
the
because,
repetition. Yep.
yeah, words are powerful. They go into our mind and kind of create the outcome that words describe.
Yep.
In fact, our words can actually unravel some of our resistance, some of the causes of our resistance, to make it easier to act that out. And so for the mind piece, I would say self-talk. Think about the outcome of what you're seeking and turn it into some simple statements that you repeat, like you said, regularly. I'll give some examples for me. When I wanted to start becoming more consistent with my morning routine, I had a hard time not only getting out of bed, but finishing all the items in my routine. So I might start some, but not finish others. Other days I would start the others and not finish the first. So I created a self-talk statement. I quickly I quickly jump into and complete all the items in my morning routine every day. I started repeating that, and now I jump out of bed and into my routine and I complete it before I move to the next thing. When I wanted to become a better communicator, I, for a long time, I used to stutter, stammer. I had a lot of ahs and ums, and what was in my head wasn't really what came out of my mouth. So I created self-talk statements like I'm an excellent communicator. I easily communicate my thoughts, ideas, feelings, experiences, and more. And it became much easier to communicate those things. So going back to the mind piece, gotta get a handle on your self-talk and start affirming the positive statements that will move you in the direction you want. For the body piece, I think it really comes down to routines. Success isn't doing something big one time, but it's really doing a lot of small things over and over. For example, for you, it's doing this podcast, not just this one time, but showing up on a consistent basis. And the first couple of shows here and there may not give you the result you're seeking, but over time, it does build that credibility and enough traction that it leads to the outcome that you're seeking. And so I really recommend people figure out the most important things that's going to move the needle forward for them, whether it's in business, whether it's in personal, whether it's in their health, and 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 take those and turn it into a routine that you show up for and do every day. Whether it's in the morning, you can do a routine in the afternoon or even an evening routine, but something that you can just show up for and not think about that you have to do and just do it. And you can be, and once it turned into routine, you show up and do it consistently. So that's the body piece. The soul piece, I think it comes down to generosity. One thing I've noticed about successful people, because recently I've been just getting around some really high net worth and people who have done really well. I'm talking people who are billionaires or, extremely famous,
Yep.
and they're extremely generous. They're very giving and they're very helpful. And I didn't think that. I thought the more successful I became, the more I would have to fight that self-centeredness piece. But it's not. It's the law of the universe. The more you put out, the more
Yep.
it's what's going to come back in. So the more you can give your time, maybe donate and things of that nature, the more it'll come back, especially in business. And for the home, the best thing a person can do is cut out anything, remove from your home anything that will stimulate your wanting mechanism in ways that's not conducive to what you want. So remove any
Like
triggers.
TV, maybe? No.
Exactly. I was just thinking that TV, radios, unhealthy food in your fridge.
Yep.
You want to remove any stimuli that will pull you away from singular focus. And that could
Perfect.
include your partner. If your partner is going to remove you from singular focus on what you're
Yep.
trying to do, you got to get rid of that person and invite someone who can be supportive to the thing that you want to do in the direction you want to move in. Because again, environment plays a huge role. Like I
Yes.
am very conscious about what the environments I go into, one, and two, the things I allow into my environment. And again, I'm very intentional about what I have in my home is going to help me stay focused on the things that I want to do and support the areas I want to grow into.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for those. Those are fantastic. I know the listeners are absolutely like, if they're anything like me and they're writing notes to each
Yeah.
podcast they listen to, and they've got a whole entire sheet of notes right now, and they're probably going to listen to this over again as I am. Because again, this topic of the internal resistance, I know what I want, I know how to do it, I have the motivation, but yet I'm still not doing it. This podcast was such an eye opener for so many different things, like just the wants versus the actual, like the different sides of the brain.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kam, for joining us. And I cannot wait to hear what the listeners write to me, and I will forward them to you, just to let you know.
Oh, thank you very much. And since we are coming to the end, I would like to offer 3 gifts for everyone who made it
Perfect.
this far. The first gift is called, since we talked about AI, it's called prompt engineering for your mind. So what I like to say is the human brain was the original ChatGPT, and we can prompt it to give us answers and solutions. And unlike ChatGPT, those prompts can help us take action on those answers and solutions. And they can get that from guide number 1. The second guide is called Build Skills and Habits in Your Sleep. So it's one thing to be intentional about doing things, but it's another when your unconscious just pushes you to do it. It's so much easier to do it that way. And
Mm-hmm.
it's possible to program our unconscious to build skills and habits and even routines to be able to do things a lot more easily. And that's with self-talk. And they can learn how to do that with the second guide. The third guide is a deeper dive into this topic of internal resistance. They can learn how our other ways our wants can get in the way, also other causes of resistance that we didn't discuss here,
Mm-hmm.
but a concept that we didn't get a chance to talk about at all, which is the tricks of resistance. So when the brain holds us back, how does it manifest? And they can learn about that in the third guide. And they can get all 3 of those from my website at kamknight.com. KAMKNIGHT.com. And if anybody wants to do one-on-one work with me, I have developed a technique that helps people go into their unconscious to work on their resistance. And it's a much more direct because we're going into their unconscious and seeing what the resistance are. So we're not guessing, and we can release it as well. And they can reach out to me at coach@kamknight.com. Oftentimes, when I tell people about this method I've developed, they ask me if it's like NLP or hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like that. It's a very different modality, and it's actually pretty mind-boggling.
That's
So,
awesome. And just for all the listeners, I will make sure that every single link that he's just spoken about will be in the show notes so you can find those as well. Thank
yeah.
you again, Cam, and we will see you later.
Thank
Bye.
you very much, Heather. This was great.